James had always been a solitary man, lived on a quiet farm on the edge of the world, far from the hustle and bustle of the city. It wasn't much, but it was enough for him. It had everything he needed: fresh air, space to think, and a daily routine he could count on. But all that changed the day he found her. It was an early morning, and the sun had just begun to rise over the horizon, casting long shadows across the fields. James was out checking his crops, his boots crunching against the frost-covered ground. He paused, wiping his brow with the back of his hand, when he noticed something strange in the distance. At first he thought it was a trick of the light, a dark figure in the middle of the wasteland that stretched out beyond his farm. But as he walked closer, the figure began to take shape, a small, frail form, lying motionless in the dirt. Panic rose in his chest. He rushed forward, his heart pounding as he approached the figure. It was a girl, an alien girl. Her skin was an unusual shade of pale blue, tinged with hints of purple, and her features were delicate, almost ethereal. She looked like no creature he had ever seen before. Her long, silver hair was tangled, matted with dirt and dust. Clothes were torn and ragged, as if she had been traveling for days, maybe weeks, without food or rest. She was barely breathing, her body thin and weak. James knelt beside her, his hands trembling. He could feel the warmth of her skin despite her condition. There was no time to waste. He gently lifted her into his arms, his mind racing with questions. Who was she? Where did she come from? Why was she out here alone in the middle of nowhere? He didn't have answers, but he did know one thing. He had to help her, with careful hands. James carried her back to his farmhouse. It wasn't much, but it was the only place he could think of to keep her safe. He placed her gently on the couch in the small living room and began searching for supplies. Water, blankets, anything he could use to comfort her. After a few moments, he managed to find a small stash of dried fruits and vegetables. He soaked them in warm water, hoping they would be soft enough for her to eat. When he returned, he was relieved to find that she hadn't moved. But her eyes were now open, blinking slowly as she stared at him, confusion clouding her expression. "Are you okay?" James asked gently, sitting beside her. His voice was soft, as if speaking too loudly might scare her away. She tried to speak, but her voice came out as a hoarse whisper. Thank you," she rasped, her alien accent thick but understandable. James smiled, though he felt uneasy. He had no idea what to say. What could he say? Here she was, an alien, and all he could do was offer her a meal and some shelter. He didn't even know if she would accept it, but she had no choice. She was starving, and this was the only help she was going to get. "I'm James," he said, keeping his tone calm. "You're safe here. Just rest. You've been through a lot." The alien girl nodded weakly, closing her eyes as she sank back into the couch. She looked exhausted, but there was a strange sense of calm that washed over her, as if she trusted James without question. He didn't know how, but it was there. As the hours passed, James did what he could to help. He gave her small amounts of food, watching carefully as she slowly regained strength. The strange alien girl, whose name she had yet to reveal, seemed to be recovering with each passing minute. But it wasn't just her body that was healing. It was her spirit, too. There was something about her, a presence that made James feel as though he had been waiting for her all his life. He couldn't explain it. Maybe it didn't make sense, but he felt a connection to her deep down. It was as if she wasn't just some stranger who had fallen from the sky. She was someone important, someone who belonged in his life. It wasn't long before she spoke again, her voice stronger this time. "My name is Lyra," she said, her eyes locking onto his. I don't know how to repay you. I've never met anyone like you before." James frowned, not knowing what to say. "You don't have to repay me," he replied softly. "I just wanted to help." Lyra nodded slowly, her eyes filled with gratitude. She seemed lost in thought for a moment before turning her gaze toward the window. "My people, they're gone," she said quietly. "My world, destroyed. I'm the last one." James didn't know what to say. The weight of her words hit him like a wave, but he didn't press her for more information. It was clear that Lyra had experienced things no one should have to endure. After a few moments, James stood up. "You should rest. I'll be here when you wake up." Lyra looked up at him, her eyes softening. "Thank you, James. I will never forget this." Right. And with that, she closed her eyes, drifting off into a peaceful sleep. James watched her for a moment, unsure of what the future held, but certain that whatever happened, he had made the right choice. The following days passed quietly, but James noticed the change in Lyra. She had gone from a weak, broken figure to someone who was slowly starting to regain her strength. The food, the rest, and the care he had provided were working wonders. But it was more than that. There was something about Lyra that intrigued him, something in the way she carried herself, the way her eyes sparkled with hope despite everything she had lost. It was a hope he couldn't help but feel connected to. Lyra was still adjusting to her new surroundings. At first, she stayed mostly inside the small farmhouse, resting, recovering. James respected her need for space but tried to make her feel at ease. He offered her books from his small library, mostly about Earth's history and culture, hoping it might distract her from the pain of her past. One afternoon, as James worked on his farm, Lyra approached him. She stood quietly at the edge of the garden, watching him as he worked. It was the first time she'd come outside since he found her. Her purple-blue skin seemed to glow under the sunlight, and her silver hair shone like a metal thread. Looked fragile, yet strong, and James couldn't help but admire her resilience. "You're doing well," James said, wiping the sweat from his brow as he approached her. "How are you feeling?" Lyra smiled softly. "Better. Thank you for everything." Her voice was still gentle, but it was stronger now, more confident. James nodded. "You've come a long way. But I want you to know you don't have to rush anything. Take your time." Lyra looked around at the open fields, the simple life James had here. I don't know how to begin to thank you for saving me, but I want to help you. I want to contribute." She looked at the soil beneath her feet. "I want to learn how to farm, how to survive in this world. I've lost everything, but maybe I can find something here." James was surprised by her words. He hadn't expected her to offer anything in return. He was just trying to help her, as any decent person would. But it seemed that her nature, her desire to contribute, ran deep. She wasn't the kind of person to sit idly by, waiting for others to act on her behalf. "You don't have to prove anything to me, Lyra," James said gently. "You've already done more than enough just by trusting me." Lyra looked up at him, her expression serious. "But I want to. I need to do something. I can't just sit here and wait. I've lost my people. I've lost my world. I still have a chance at something. I want to make it count." James didn't know what to say. There was a fire in her eyes that he couldn't ignore. She wasn't just looking for survival. She was looking for a way to rebuild, to start something new. That was something he could relate to. After all, he had come from a place of solitude, only to have his life changed by her arrival. "All right," James said after a moment of silence. "If you want to learn, I can teach you. It's not easy, but I think you're capable of it." Lyra smiled, grateful for his support. It was the first real smile James had seen from her, and it made his heart skip a beat. There was something about her that pulled him in, something about her strength and grace. She wasn't just some alien in need of help. She was someone who had endured, who had fought to survive, and who now, in some strange way, was fighting for a new life. The next few days were filled with lessons. James showed Lyra how to plant seeds, how to care for the soil, how to harvest the crops. She absorbed everything with an intensity that was surprising given how little time she had spent on Earth. Her alien nature gave her an edge. She was faster, more adaptable, and her sharp mind helped her pick up skills quickly. One evening, as they sat outside together after a long day of work, Lyra turned to James. "I know this might sound strange, but I feel at home here," she said, her voice soft, yet certain. James raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. "I'm glad you feel that way. I know it's not much, but it's all I've got." Lyra's gaze shifted to the stars above. "I've never been anywhere like this. My world was once filled with beauty and wonder, but it was destroyed. Never thought I'd find peace again, but here, with you, It feels like a new beginning." James felt a warmth spread through his chest at her words. It was strange, this feeling that had grown between them. He didn't know how to explain it, but he knew that their connection went beyond simple gratitude. There was something more, something deeper. Over the next few weeks, Lyra continued to thrive. Her confidence grew, and so did their bond. The distance between them shrank, and moments that once felt like simple gestures, a smile, a shared glance, began to feel more intimate. James found himself thinking about her more often than he cared to admit. She wasn't just an alien girl anymore. She was someone he cared for, someone who had become an important part of his life. One evening, after a long day of work, Lyra sat next to James on the porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Lyra looked over at him, her eyes thoughtful. "James," she began, her voice hesitant, "I don't know if this is the right time to say this, but I want you to know how much you mean to me." James turned to her, surprised by the seriousness in her tone. "You mean a lot to me too," he said quietly, unsure where this conversation was heading. Lyra took a deep breath. "I know we're from different worlds, but I want to start over. I want to build something with you, not just survive, but create something new." James felt a rush of emotions stir within him. He wasn't sure what the future held, but in that moment, he knew one thing for certain: things were changing. He was ready to face whatever came next. The peaceful days James had come to cherish soon began to feel fragile. The once quiet life spent with Lyra by his side now seemed to stir with the soft undercurrent of something far more dangerous. They had built a routine together, their lives slowly intertwining. Lyra had proven herself a quick learner, and James began to see her as more than just a survivor. She was his partner, and their bond grew stronger with every passing day. But peace, it seemed, was not meant to last. One evening, as James worked in the fields, he felt a shiver down his spine. He paused, looking around, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. Lyra, who had been helping him plant new crops, noticed his sudden pause and walked over to him. "James, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. He turned to her, frowning. "I don't know. Just feels like something's off. I can't shake the feeling." Lyra stood beside him, her senses sharp, always more alert than James. She too felt it. Though she couldn't put her finger on what it was, something in the air was different, and it wasn't just the changing seasons. "Maybe you're just tired." "You've been working hard lately," Lyra suggested, trying to ease his worry. James smiled, but didn't feel reassured. He couldn't explain it, but it felt like they were being watched. The next day, as they were finishing their work, the feeling intensified. This time, James didn't ignore it. He urged Lyra to stay inside the house, to rest while he checked the perimeter of the farm. She reluctantly agreed, sensing his growing concern. As James walked toward the edge of his property, he noticed something strange in the distance. A dark figure. He squinted, his heart rate picking up as the figure drew closer. Wasn't the usual wildlife, no. This was something else entirely, something human-shaped. There was no way anyone should be out here in the wild, far from any towns or settlements. Then, more figures appeared, emerging from the shadows. They moved with military precision, their movements swift and coordinated. James's breath caught in his throat. These weren't just ordinary travelers or scavengers. These were soldiers. They weren't alone. Their gear looked advanced, and they moved like they were hunting something or someone. Panic flooded James's mind. He had to protect Lyra, but how? Turning quickly, he sprinted back toward the house, adrenaline pushing him faster than he ever thought possible. He burst through the door, slamming it behind him. "Lyra," called urgently. "We need to leave now." Lyra, who had been sitting by the window, immediately stood up. Her calm demeanor vanished as she saw the panic in James's eyes. "What's happening?" she asked, voice steady but with a hint of fear. "Soldiers," James said, his voice tight. "They're coming. They must have tracked us here." "We don't have much time." Lyra's eyes widened with recognition. She had been on the run for weeks before James had found her, and she knew all too well what soldiers like these meant. They were searching for her, and James's farm had become a target. "Where can we go?" she asked, her voice steady, but her hands shaking. James quickly thought through his options. "There's a cave system a few miles east of here. It's hidden, and I think it's our best shot." Without wasting any more time, they grabbed only the essentials and ran. The sun had barely begun to set, and the sky above them was painted in streaks of orange and pink. Felt like a cruel contrast to the dread building in James's chest as they hurried toward the cave. The world around them seemed to close in, and each step they took felt like it carried them further away from safety. Lyra, though, was calm. Her past had taught her to survive in the worst of conditions. Despite the fear she must have felt, she kept pace with James, her eyes scanning the horizon, alert for any sign of danger. Her alien senses were sharper than his, and James was grateful for her quiet strength. As they neared the cave entrance, James heard the distant sound of engines. The soldiers were getting closer. "They're following us," he muttered, more to himself than to Lyra. She nodded, her expression hardened. "They won't stop until they have me. You need to keep moving." "Oh." James shot her a glance. "And you?" "I'll hold them off as long as I can," she said, her voice determined. "But you need to get to safety. I'll find you. I promise." James hesitated. He didn't want to leave her behind, but he knew she was right if they were to survive. He had to trust her, and he did. He trusted her completely. The two of them slipped into the cave just as the first of the soldiers came into view. They moved quickly, finding a narrow passage that led deeper into the cave system. James could hear the sounds of the soldiers searching above, their voices muffled as they scoured the area. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were dangerously close. Lyra pressed her hand against his arm, urging him to keep moving. "Don't look back," she whispered. They moved deeper into the cave, the darkness enveloping them as the world outside grew more distant. James's heart still pounded in his chest. But now it wasn't just fear for his life, it was fear for Lyra's. She had given him a chance. She had risked everything to survive and to help him. Now, he had to do whatever it took to keep her safe, no matter the cost. The cave system was colder than James had expected. The deeper they went, the darker it became. The walls of the cave seemed to close in around them, and the sound of their footsteps echoed eerily in the silence. James's mind raced as they continued to move, his thoughts still on the soldiers hunting them. His pulse quickened with each passing moment, and he could feel the weight of the danger that pressed down on them. "Keep going," Lyra whispered, her voice calm as she led the way. Her alien eyes adjusted to the darkness far quicker than James's did. She seemed completely at ease in the shadows. James followed her closely, trying to keep up. He couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at her strength. Lyra had been through so much already, and yet she remained steady. Despite the constant threat of danger, she remained focused and resolute, never wavering. They paused for a moment, taking a breath in the cold, still air of the cave. James glanced around, trying to get his bearings. The cave was a maze of twisting paths, and the only sound was the distant drip of water echoing from deep within the rock. "Do you think they'll find us here?" James asked quietly, his voice tinged with worry. Lyra didn't answer immediately. She looked around, her gaze thoughtful. "They might," she said, "but they won't find us if we keep moving. The longer we stay in one place, the more likely they are to track us down." James nodded, feeling the weight of her words. It was hard for him to believe that they might be safe here, but he trusted her. She had been running from these soldiers for so long, and if anyone knew how to survive, it was Lyra. They pressed on, winding their way deeper into the cave. The air grew colder as they walked, and James could feel a shiver running down his spine. He was exhausted, his body aching from the long hours of running and hiding, but he pushed through. He had to keep moving. For Lyra's sake, after what felt like hours, they came to a small chamber deep in the heart of the cave. It was narrow, with just enough room for them to sit. The flickering light from James's small flashlight illuminated the stone walls. Casting strange shadows on the floor, Lyra sat down first. Leaning against the cool stone, her eyes still scanning the darkness, James sat beside her, trying to relax, but his mind wouldn't stop racing. The fear was there, lurking beneath the surface. How long could they keep running? How long before the soldiers found them? His eyes fell on Lyra. She looked exhausted. Her usually strong posture slightly slumped, but she was still holding herself together. There was a quiet strength in her, one that James admired deeply. He had never seen anyone like her before. She was a warrior. But she had a kindness about her that made her unique. James couldn't help but think about what she had said before, how she wanted to start over, build something new. He felt the same way. His life had been quiet, isolated before he met her. But now, it felt like everything had changed. The farm, the peaceful days they had spent together, it all felt so far away now. Lost in the wake of the soldiers' arrival, he glanced at Lyra, his heart heavy with questions. "Lyra," he began softly, "what happens when this is all over? What happens after we leave here?" She turned to him, her eyes meeting his with a calmness that was almost unsettling. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I do know that I can't go back. Not to the way things were before. I've lost too much, and now I've found something worth fighting for." James's heart skipped a beat. The way she said it with such certainty made him realize just how much. They had both changed. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about creating something new, something they could build together. And in that moment, he knew that no matter what happened, he couldn't imagine his life without her. He reached out, touching her arm lightly, his fingers brushing against her cool skin. "I want that too," he said quietly. "I want to build something with you, something that's ours. But I need to know that we're going to be okay. I need to know that we can make it through this." Lyra's gaze softened as she looked at him. "We will," she said. "We've already come this far. We're stronger than we think." James nodded, though doubt still lingered in the back of his mind. It was hard to ignore the danger, the uncertainty that surrounded them. But Lyra's presence gave him hope. She'd faced so much, and still she kept fighting. She kept believing that something better was possible. "Thank you," James said, his voice quiet. "Thank you for trusting me, for letting me help you." Lyra smiled softly, the faintest hint of sadness in her expression. "I trust you because you've shown me kindness when I needed it most. I've never met anyone like you before, James. You've given me a chance to live again." The words hit James harder than he expected. He hadn't realized the weight of what he had done, how much of a difference it had made in Lyra's life. It wasn't just about saving her from starvation or danger. It was about giving her a reason to hope again, a reason to fight for something beyond survival. They sat in silence for a while. The only sound, the distant echo of water dripping in the cave. James tried to relax, but his mind kept returning. To the soldiers, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were getting closer, that it wouldn't be long before they found their hiding place. But Lyra was right. They'd come this far. And whatever happened, they would face it together. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty, yet there was a sense of quiet determination between James and Lyra. The cave had become their refuge. It's a hiding place from the soldiers, who searched relentlessly for them. Time seemed to stretch, and the world outside felt distant, as though it no longer existed. The air in the cave was cold and damp, but there was warmth in the small moments they shared. James often found himself thinking about the future, about what would happen when they left the cave. The soldiers were still out there, and although they had managed to stay hidden so far, James knew it couldn't last forever. Every day they moved deeper into the cave, further away from any hope of finding a safe place to stay. But there was something else on his mind, something that had been growing ever since he had met Lyra. He had never expected to feel this way about her. It had started with simple acts of kindness, taking her in, feeding her, and offering her a place to recover. But now, after everything they had been through together, James couldn't deny it anymore. It cared for her deeply, more than he had ever cared for anyone before. She had become more than just the alien girl he had saved. Had become a part of his life. One night, as they sat by the small fire they had managed to start, James couldn't hold back any longer. Lyra sat across from him, her silver hair glowing faintly in the firelight. Her eyes focused on the flames as she spoke softly. I think about my people, she said quietly, about what I've lost. I never imagined I would end up like this. But I've also realized something. I'm not alone anymore. She looked at James, a gentle smile on her face. I've never met anyone like you. You've shown me what it means to care for someone, to not just survive, but to live. You've made me believe again. James felt a lump in his throat at her words. He had never expected to have such an impact on her, to be the one who gave her hope when she had lost so much. But now, more than ever, he understood how important that was. I care about you, Lyra, he said, his voice quiet but steady. I never thought I would feel this way about anyone, let alone someone from another world. But here we are. I don't want to lose you. Lyra's eyes softened as she looked at him, the warmth of the fire reflected in her gaze. She reached across the space between them, her hand resting gently on his. James, you're not going to lose me. Not now. The words sent a wave of relief through James. For the first time in weeks, he felt a weight lift off his chest. He had been afraid of what would happen if they were found, afraid of the danger that still surrounded them. But with Lyra by his side, he realized something. He didn't have to face it alone. I know we've been through a lot, James said, his voice barely above a whisper. But I want to build a future with you, Lyra. I want us to have a life beyond just surviving. It's a life where we don't have to hide, where we can be safe. I don't know how, but I know I want that. With you? Lyra's expression shifted, and for a moment she looked surprised. It was clear that she hadn't expected him to say that. But then, slowly, her features softened, and she smiled. I want that too, she said, her voice full of emotion. I don't just want to survive anymore. I want to live. I want to build something we can both be proud of. Why? Want a family, James? I want a future? James's heart raced as her words sank in. Family. It wasn't something he had considered, not in any serious way. But the more he thought about it, the more it felt right. He had never felt more certain of anything in his life. With Lyra, he could see a future, one that wasn't just about surviving or hiding in the shadows. They could create something new, something beautiful, together. He reached out, taking her hand in his thumb gently brushing over her skin. Then we'll do it, he said, his voice steady. We'll create a future, a family. We'll do whatever it takes to make sure it's ours. Lyra squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with a mix of hope and gratitude. Thank you, she whispered. I never thought I'd find someone like you. I never thought I'd get a chance to start over. James smiled, feeling a warmth spread through him. We'll start over together. And no matter what happens, we'll face it as a family. Out at that moment. As they sat together in the quiet cave, everything seemed clearer. The world outside was still dangerous, still full of uncertainty. But for the first time in a long while, James didn't feel afraid. They had each other, and together they could face whatever came next. As the fire crackled between them, Lyra leaned in, her forehead gently resting against his. I'm glad you found me, James, she said, her voice soft. I'm glad you were there when I needed you most. James kissed the top of her head, feeling the weight of her words. And I'm glad I found you. The future was uncertain, but in that moment, with Lyra by his side, James felt ready to face whatever came next. He had never been more certain that they could make it through together. They would start a family, not just of blood, but of heart, of hope, and of everything they had built together. The days that followed their decision to build a future together were both filled with hope and uncertainty. The cave had become their home for now, but James and Lyra knew it wasn't a place they could stay forever. The soldiers were still out there searching, and every moment they spent hiding made them more aware of the danger that followed them. But even in the midst of that danger, something had changed. They were no longer just trying to survive. They were building something together. Every day, they worked on finding a safer place. A place where they could finally begin their new life, free from the fear of being hunted, and through it, all their bond grew stronger. Lyra had become more than just the alien girl he had saved. She had become his partner, his confidant, and someone he trusted with his life. James had never imagined he could feel so strongly about anyone, especially not someone so different from him. But here they were, two people from different worlds, united by a shared hope for something better. One morning, as James worked on making the cave more comfortable, Lyra approached him with a smile, as she looked different, more at ease than she had been in weeks. The worry lines on her face seemed less deep, and there was a spark in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "I've been thinking," Lyra began, sitting down beside him. "I think it's time. Time to leave the cave and find a place to start our new life." James paused, looking at her with a mixture of surprise and excitement. "Are you sure?" he asked. "I mean, I thought we should stay here a little longer, until we're sure the soldiers won't find us." Lyra nodded, her expression firm but gentle. "We can't keep running forever. We've been hiding for so long, and it's taking a toll on both of us. I believe we can find a place where we can live freely, where we can start a family without fear." James looked at her, the weight of her words sinking in. She was right. They couldn't keep running. The world was out there, waiting for them to take the next step. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that they had already waited long enough. "You're right," he said, his voice steady. "It's time. Let's find a place we can call our own, a place where we can build that future together." Lyra's eyes brightened and she smiled, the kind of smile that made James's heart flutter. "I knew you'd understand," she said, her voice full of warmth. Over the next few days, they packed their things and made plans to leave the cave. The soldiers were still a concern, but they had grown more careful in their movements, using the caves and many tunnels and hidden paths. To avoid detection, they moved quietly, always staying one step ahead, but there was a new sense of purpose in their actions. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about creating a future. As they traveled through the rugged terrain, Lyra's strength and resilience became even more apparent. She moved with grace, her alien senses guiding them through the wilderness. James marveled at her ability to read the land, to know where to go and where to avoid danger. She was a warrior, yes, but she was also a protector. And now she was protecting him just as much as he had protected her. One evening, as they rested by a small stream, James turned to her with a question that had been on his mind for some time. "Lyra," he began, his voice soft, "do you think about the future? I mean, what do you want from all this? From us?" Lyra looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "I want peace," she said, her voice calm but determined. "I want a life where I don't have to look over my shoulder every day. A life where I can raise a family, teach them about my people, and show them the strength that comes from surviving. I want to build something with you, James. I want a future where we don't just survive, we thrive." James's heart swelled at her words. It was everything he had wanted, everything he had dreamed of since they first met. To build something with her, to have a life together, to create a family. It seemed impossible at times, given everything they had been through. But now, sitting by the stream with Lyra beside him, he felt more certain than ever that it was possible. "I want that too," he said, his voice steady. "I want to build that future with you. I want us to be able to look back one day and know we did it. We started something new, something worth fighting for." Lyra smiled, her hand resting gently on his. "We will," she said. "Together, we'll build something that lasts. And when we look back, we'll know it was worth it." The next day, they continued their journey, determined to find the place where they could begin their new life. It wasn't easy. The terrain was harsh, and there were still dangers lurking around every corner. But they pressed on, moving through forests and across rivers, always staying ahead of the soldiers who were still searching for them. As the days passed, they finally reached the top of a hill that overlooked a valley below. The sight took James's breath away. It was a peaceful place, untouched by the chaos they had left behind. The valley was surrounded by mountains, and the land was fertile, perfect for farming. James could already imagine them living there, building a home and starting a family. Lyra stood beside him, her eyes scanning the land, a smile slowly spreading across her face. "This is it," she said softly. "This is where we'll start." James looked at her, his heart full of hope. This is where we'll build our future." Together, they descended into the valley, ready to begin the next chapter of their lives. The soldiers may still be out there, but James and Lyra had already won the most important battle, the battle for their future. And as they stood side by side, ready to start a new life, they knew one thing for certain: they were no longer running. They were home.